about the places I have known, I realize that times have changed. So I'll do what I can to make this house into a home. Yeah, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Real Siblings. It Ain't Easy. I want to say part two. This is our second episode. And this is where I, Donna Reed, and my brother,
Eric Seemann,
are going to journey back a little bit into our childhood in the small town of Lindsey, Ohio. Our goal in these podcasts is to not only reminisce about where we grew up, but also to show how our lives were affected and how it kind of led us into our careers in real estate. For me, I'm with Keller Williams in Tucson, and Eric, you are?
I am with Keller Williams Heritage in San Antonio, Texas.
Right. So our goal, again, as we move forward, we're going to, last time we just introduced you overall to the concept. And if you listen to that, then you have an idea of what we're doing moving forward. And so now we'll hopefully talk more details about not only the homes we lived in, but the community and everything around, and compare and contrast. And we hope that you'll continue to journey with us as we go through our memories, the years and the miles. So today we're going to talk about foundations, which I know is probably exciting for all of you, right? Woohoo, go foundations. And as before I hand it over to Eric, I want to say that, of course, we went back and we listened to the first one ourselves, and Eric and I talked about the fact that one time we said it was a 2-story home, then we said it was a 3-story home. And since we're going to talk about the foundation, we're just going to clear that up a little bit, that, there was a basement and then 2 stories we lived in and an attic in the 1868 home. So hopefully that makes it a little more clear. And then I just told Eric that my son, the other thing that he caught in the first podcast, which was funny, was that he said, Mom, what is story hour? So in another episode, maybe when we talk about schools and everything, we can bring you up to speed on, for those of us that didn't go to kindergarten. But for now, Eric, tell us a little bit about the foundation of our 1868 brick home.
Yeah. So the house that I consider that I grew up in, even though we moved into it in the summer of 73. I was 8 years old, had just had my 8th birthday, and the core of the house, and I use that terminology because it was built in 1868. And as Donna and I have gone back and forth and we've talked about this, that means the house in 1868, the area of the house that had the kitchen that we cooked in, ate in, and the main bathroom with our tub shower combo, double vanity toilet, probably all was added not just a few years later, but several decades later. So the main house was this 2-story brick house with the mansard roof. And Donna mentioned it had a basement, and it was on what we refer to as a pier and beam foundation. And contrast that to where I'm at in San Antonio, almost everything is a slab foundation. And Donna, I think you said the same is true out in Tucson.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so y'all know, I had to go look up pier and beam. Thank heavens Eric has a better idea of what all that stuff means. So then the other home that we brought up the last time was the home that was built in 1957. And we remember that also had a basement. And that was kind of like right off the dining room, right? I mean, the door went down into the basement right off the dining room in the main street house.
Yeah. As you walk through the archway from the kitchen, because there wasn't a door there, into the dining room. Yep. Immediately to the right-hand side was the door that went down into the basement.
Right. And that was a little bit smaller than the one on Lynn Street, than the older home. And stairs were kind of steep. Utilities down in the basement. You could get to the plumbing and the electric and things like that. And but the one, Eric, tell everybody a little bit more about what the basement on Lynn Street was like. And I'm going to say,
the other thing that we had talked about is that in both of these houses, my dad being an independent insurance salesperson needed a space for a home office. And he chose in both locations to put his work desk and files in the basement. So that was on Main Street, the house from 1957, and on Lynn Street, the house from 1868. And along with where his desk sat down in the basement, there was also, it sat right next to a huge cistern that collected water. And it was tight, it was cramped, it was definitely cold in the winter. But one of the things that really stood out from it that I think, again, is kind of an unusual thing is that, again, with the climates that we, both Donna and I live in now in Tucson and San Antonio, the basement had a huge fuel tank for heating oil that you'd use in the winter. And the whole idea of putting fuel oil in a house in a basement, it just wouldn't happen.
No.
I mean, you have to have a basement, but you will also, nowadays, they would not think, yeah, let's put a tank full of hundreds of gallons of fuel in the basement.
In the basement. And actually the other home that I lived in, the other one on Main Street, which was also built in the 1950s, also had that fuel oil tank in the basement. I remember them coming from the elevator, right? It was the elevator that came and filled it up, I believe. And then that basement was a full house, was the length of the whole house. And we had ping pong table and miscellaneous things down there, but it also got wet. And it also leaked in there. And we also had sump pumps. And we also ruined photos and things that were, pieces of history were lost in that basement. So frankly, the house on Walnut Street, I barely remember. I remember a tiny little crawl space, and I can't picture getting into there, which is where I lived with Gil and the kids, in our home in Lindsey.
That was home number 3.
That was home number 3. Yeah.
Home number 3 in Lindsey for
1,
you.
2, 3, 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So Eric, what about, the other thing I wanted to mention about the 1868 home is Mom still did a lot of canning. So when we would go down in the basement also, because the coolness and the dampness, there were cupboards that were there, and we would have stewed tomatoes and things like that would be stored down in the basement.
Beans, beets, and tomatoes, right? Those were the primary 3 things.
That was kind of it. Yeah, we had a whole, those were dead.
The garden did not have the variety that you expect nowadays.
No, that's true.
A produce section or in a garden nowadays, that's for certain.
But I learned to love red beets, so it was all good. All right, so Eric, what about San Antonio? What are the structures? What are the houses built on?
Yeah, so the big thing is what we've heard is slab or slab on grade, and it's poured concrete. They put a frame. In many cases, because San Antonio sits on top of the Edwards Aquifer, it is a huge limestone shelf. So when a builder comes in and starts construction, they clear everything out, they level. They don't necessarily even bring in a lot of base, especially on areas of town that were really, really flat. Now, as you've started to move out and develop, and growth of the city has occurred where the ground is not as naturally level, those slabs, they'll have to bring limestone in from a limestone quarry, and they are all over San Antonio, fill inside the frame, pack it, and then pour concrete on top and down the sides in order to create the foundation. And within that, they also put all of your utilities. There's your sewer pipes that go in there. You've got water lines that are coming in from the city to provide water to the house. In some cases, there's going to be some basic electrical because everybody wants to do underground utilities now. So there may be a tie instead of just right next to the house. There could be something inside, depending on the age of the house. But it
Do you have
being
many
a slab on grade. Yeah.
Do you have basements there to speak of?
Yeah, no. I would say basements are less than 1% of all of the houses in San Antonio. And even then, they're not a true basement. It's a house that was built on the side of a hill. And rather than try to build a slab that's 15 foot tall on the back end of the house,
right,
they put a staircase and put a downstairs room, but it opens out of the house. It's not a true basement like we grew up in, or a storm shelter you might have had in another part of the country.
Yeah. Yeah. Tucson's
Tucson?
a little bit the same way. And, we have, we're in a valley, with mountains like all around us. And so there's obviously in the foothills, you're building on the side of a hill, right? And those are the ones that have also the walkout basement. There might be an office down there. There might be a pool table, or something like that. And then those will walk out to maybe the area of the swimming pool or something like that.
Yeah. And, I talk about being the slab or the slab on grade, and that's probably something that started transition really in the 1950s. Before that, the houses were still pier and beam here in San Antonio. And generally when I'm working with clients and they walk up to a house, it's like, well, is that a slab or is it pier on beam? And I said, look at the porch. I said, you're going up 3 stairs. That'll tell you that is a pier and beam house. A slab on grade is going to be maybe 1 step along the sidewalk before you get to the front door, because you don't have to go up for a concrete slab that's built on top of a level piece of ground. So that's a differentiator here. The other thing that in some of the really old houses that I've gotten into in San Antonio, those pier and beams.
Let me ask real quick. How old is really old?
Well, San Antonio goes back. I mean, the Battle of the Alamo was 1836.
Okay.
From 1836 up into the 1900s, San Antonio was the biggest city in Texas, larger than Houston, larger than Dallas. Those things didn't start to develop until the oil boom started to come into place. So the oldest house I think I've been in, had pictures underneath, goes back to the late 1800s. So an 1890, an 1890 house. But what's interesting is that there's a variety of tree here in South Texas. Officially, it's a juniper ash. We call it mountain cedar. And it's really, really resistant to moisture and naturally resilient to insect infestation, termites, crazy ants, things along those lines. So they would just lop off a big piece of a tree and set it on the ground. And I've gone into houses even as new as like a 1910, 1920, where it's nothing but a 16-inch round log that still has the bark on it sitting on the ground.
Wow.
That's the pier.
Wow.
And then the beam is real wood that is laid horizontally or laterally on top of those piers to create the frame and that you build up from for your walls and flooring.
I think I've only been in one that's even remotely like that down in the older part of town, because Tucson grew around the university and the old, Fort Lowell. We also then, primarily build on slab. And I used to think it was just because people were lazy and cheap. However, I have learned, why can't you build a basement if you can build a pool? But I have learned over time that also, because our ground is so hard, we have soil that we call caliche. I don't know if you use or have that term.
Yeah, we use caliche roads. That's
Yep. So for those of us that grew up where ground is really soft and really moist and easy to till, this is very different, right? So it's hard. It's like jackhammer hard. And there's so many chemicals and calcium and other things in there that it's like going through concrete, even though it's not concrete, it's just compacted dirt. So one of the things that builders have done here is they've added the metal, the steel wires through it to give support, a post tension. And the post tension gets laid, like you were talking about the limestone first. So that was interesting. So the post tension goes in, and it's 7 or 8 steel wires that are entwined together and then encased, and they run through the home, and they are specifically there to support up to about 30,000 pounds of pressure that comes and goes. So it's great, and it's way better, and it's used way more often in many of the new homes. And usually a homeowner will be notified that their home is a post tension home. It'll be a stamp by the garage or something, because if you go in and you decide, I'm going to drill a hole in my garage for some reason, and you go through one of those, it will literally snap. And you've hit the cable and you've destroyed the strength of the foundation. It can hurt you bad.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, here in San Antonio, the bigger issue is not all the soil is that limestone. As you get, San Antonio kind of sits right on the edge of the Gulf coastal plain, right, from Corpus Christi up to San Antonio, and then goes to the upland plateau, which takes you out further north and west in Texas, and that's where the hill country comes in Texas.
Yeah.
When you get down into that Gulf Coastal plain, it's a softer soil. It doesn't and has not held up as well, and we will have slab failure down in those areas. And that's because concrete carries compression strength, which is your point of it can hold all that weight, but it needs to have something underneath it to create that sturdiness and strength.
Right.
Of it. And as soon as that starts to go, it shifts, it collapses. Concrete doesn't have what's known as the tensile strength, and then it cracks. I mean, I've been into houses where you can feel it as you walk in the door. There was one that I showed early on. The table was so bad, I set my drink down on, and you could see the slope of the beverage on a 60-inch round kitchen table. And there had been nothing noted on it. It was crazy.
Wow. So I think the worst scenario that I ever had was where a carport had been added and created a room. And whoever did that, this was in probably a 1940s or 50s home down near the university. They had put a great big fireplace on that exterior wall. Well, the fireplace was so heavy on this slab that was not post-tension that the room started separating from the main part of the house. I had never seen anything like it. And I thought, oh man, this is somebody that's got a whole lot of fixing to do, because it was fine for a carport because all it was four.
Right. Yeah. And I'd say probably, I mean, that was one of the ones that was actually being sold as residential. I had gone into one with an investor. And in that particular case, the ground had heaved and shifted so much that once we got in the door, turned around, the anchor bolts for the framing to the foundation or slab had held, but it pulled the wall away from the ceiling. And there was an 8-inch gap that we could look straight up into the attic crawl space on this house. The whole thing had to be demolished. It was crazy.
Wow.
So,
well, I don't know where we're at with time, but
we committed to keeping these short. So we've got to do if the director's there going,
wrap it up, you two who could talk forever. So we hope this gives you a little bit of information about Ohio and Texas and Tucson. And next time we're going to talk a little bit about the actual structure of the home, right? How they're built. I think that's what we decided.
Right. That's what we were going to start with external walls and then go to internal walls. And then put a roof on it.
Yeah. Put a roof on the house. So anyway, Eric.
And we're going to find out about Story Hour.
Yes.
and we have to say thank you to our friends that we're connected with back in Lindsey, who helped us remember, because we're going, man, it was the 4th of July flood and it had to be somewhere in this time frame. And we had a bunch of people chime in. It was like, July 4th flood in 1969. And of course, that meant I was 4 years old. And I just remember that door off of the dining room. You looked in and it was less than 2 foot down, and it was a puddle of water. You couldn't see into the basement. And that was Dad's office. And there was electrical down there. I mean, it was some crazy stuff.
At least it wasn't a wooden desk. It was a metal desk. So
right. It didn't float.
It didn't float. There were people rowing their boats in the street that year. Yeah.
All right. So we're committed to making this happen. Thank you again for taking time to listen to us as we've reminisced and reflected and how life in our small town, Lindsey, Ohio, has impacted both our lives and our careers in real estate. Again, as we wrap up this episode, please remember our goal is to help you find a property that you can call home to create lasting memories in, so that in 20, 30, 40 years, you can do this same sort of thing. Until then, I'm Eric.
And I'm Donna.
We are Real Siblings.
Every time I think about the places I have known, I realize that times have changed. So I'll do what I can to make this house into a home. Yeah.